Well, it's Tuesday, and that means we're back on this series I'm working on right now called I Hate to Paint. Now, if you saw Sunday's show, I used a technique there, and I used an expression called wet edge painting. And wet edge painting simply means not allowing the edge of the paint that you're currently working on to dry. So in this case, I was putting a black wash over the water tank, and if I allow this to set up, then you will see the edge of where this paint has set up. It leaves a very noticeable dry edge there. So I have to continually work into wet paint. So I have to make sure that everything is wet enough here and then move quickly enough and keep moving all the way around the tank so that I'm never adding wet paint back over the top of paint that's already dry. That's called wet edge painting. Now, sometimes I'll actually use that as a technique for weathering. So you can see on the bottom of the tank here, I've created little pools of water and added just a little bit of this water-based acrylic paint in there and then let it dry. And that creates exactly what we're trying to avoid on the side of the tank, and that's a water stain like this, which looks really neat on the bottom of the tank. But on the sides of the tank here, I want a nice uniform amount of this wash down in the cracks to kind of bring out the shadows and the wood grain and that sort of thing. And yes, a little bit of something that looks like water staining, but mostly I'm just trying to fill in the cracks with a dark color so that it'll bring out, especially bring out this wood grain. And so I've picked a spot here on one of the heavy seams to start off, and then I'm going to go wet all the way around, keeping a wet edge as I go all the way around the tank back to that seam, knowing that there will be dry up against wet right there, and therefore I will have some kind of a noticeable seam. So I just placed that on one of the seams where the various parts join together to try to help cover that up. And she said she's made it quite. Now, the expression wet edge painting actually comes from house painting. I sort of picked that up when I used to do house painting. Back in the 1970s, I was working in building maintenance, and we had to paint apartments. And I painted a lot of apartments back then. Anyway, when you're painting a wall, you want to keep the entire wall a nice uniform color without any roller marks in it. And the way you do that is by starting at one side of the wall and then working all the way across, keeping a wet edge and always bringing your roller into that wet edge. And if you do it that way, then it doesn't leave any roller marks. So that's where this expression wet edge painting comes from, house painting. But the technique is also used in automotive finishes. In this case, you keep your gun pointed a uniform distance from the automotive panel and then moving, in this case, right to left across the door panel, overlapping by about a foot so that you're always working into the wet edge that you already created on your previous pass. And that means you have to move kind of quickly and then start at one side of the panel and move all the way across to the other side of the panel, trying to carefully overlap without letting the edge ever dry out. So you have to have a plan. I'm going to start here, then I'm going to cross back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, always painting into the area that's already wet and never painting into an area that's already started to set up. So something that you can do that will really help when you're trying to maintain a wet edge is to slow the paint down so it doesn't set up quite so fast, especially when you're using like Mr. Color lacquers, which dry very, very fast. And so the Mr. Color leveling thinner is a retarder. It's a thinner that you use to thin the paint, but it also slows the drying down so that it's much easier to maintain a wet edge. And the other advantage is if there's some orange peel there from the spray, from the airbrush spray, as there always will be, then this allows that to level out. It slowly spreads out, and all that orange peel kind of collapses as the paint starts to set up, because it's setting up much slower. This is critical when you're trying to do a high gloss paint job on like an automobile, a model automobile. But it's also nice even when you're working with flats on your model railroad projects or something like that, just because of the way it gives you that time to keep a wet edge, and also gives it some time to get rid of the orange peel that might have come off of your airbrush. So I'm going to intentionally screw this up a bit. I'm using a very fast thinner in a lacquer paint here so that it dries really rapidly. And you can see as I'm brushing on this first very light coat, it's already setting up in some areas because it's drying so fast. And so now as I come back and put a heavier area through the middle, you can see where I've got a shiny place in the middle and flat areas off to the sides. And that's the kind of problem that you run into if you're not maintaining a wet edge across the entire object. And so here's that spoon as it's drying. It's almost dry at this point, and you can see that if this were on an automobile or something, it would be a mess. It would be completely unacceptable. And now what do? I go buy another model just to get a car body because I screwed this thing up. And this is why I say I hate to paint, because it's so easy to screw something up like this. But at least if you're aware of how you screwed it up, then maybe you can avoid doing it. So I'll be using this expression a lot, wet edge painting, and that's what I mean by that. Anyway, we'll be working on the engine shop area on the Sunday show for a little while, and maybe some other diversions from that. But for the most part, what we're working on over there is the engine shop area on the model railroad. And I hope you're going to want to follow along with that. So if you're not a subscriber to the channel, please subscribe. And that's easily done by clicking on the upcoming blue button. Zoink! Right there, the blue button. Well, we're not sure how you found this video on the internet. We sure hope you didn't find it boring and maybe just a touch informative. And Karen and I will see you here on Sunday. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.